I stood still for a moment. The picture didn't do it justice. It was a large but quiet home located on an island near Cape Cod, a small piece of land void of life. Only the cottage and the lighthouse visible across the water. 1 week's rent came to a little over $3,000. The price was steep, but completely worth it. This would be the best place to clear my head and finish writing my novel. I happily trotted across the stone walkway to the front door and grabbed the knob, ready to map out the rest of my book. It would be my second release. My publisher had been breathing down my neck for months, constantly asking for updates. Now, I had the perfect environment to complete it. Upon opening the door, I was caught off guard. "Hello!" I nearly jumped out of my skin. There was a man inside, late 50s, average build, grey mustache. It took me a moment to match the face to the one of his superhost profile. It was Garrett, the owner. "Sorry, Garrett, I didn't expect anyone to be here." He smiled. "I greet all of my guests. You people are my livelihood after all. Please come in. We have some important matters to discuss." I joined him in the living room. We sat in armchairs on opposite sides of a long coffee table. Garrett simply continued to smile. "So, what did you want to discuss?" I asked. He pulled a folded sheet of paper out from his jacket and slid it across the coffee table. It stopped in front of me. I picked it up for a closer look. The edges were worn. I began unfolding, but Garrett stopped me. "Don't. You'll have plenty of time for that later. Just listen." I looked up at him, confused but complained. "This house has been in my family for generations. Staying here can be a rewarding experience, but it can also be a dreadful one if you are not careful. Come on, Garrett. Don't tell me the place is haunted." I was the only one smiling now. Garrett looked at me unamused. My smile vanished and I gestured for him to continue. "On that sheet of paper are some rules. You must follow every last one of them. There are no exceptions. So long as you do this, your vacation will be a pleasant one. Follow the rules, Mary. If you don't, you're in for a bumpy ride." When he left, I unfolded the list, expecting to see usual stay requirements. No pets, clean up after yourself, that sort of thing. This wasn't the case. On the paper was a set of rules that only served to bookend our strange encounter with further confusion. No lights on past 11:25 p.m. Don't answer your phone. Callers cannot be trusted. Only 2 people are permitted inside. Hank Penston and Jessica Covenwood. Ask for last names. Don't exit the house after midnight until sunrise. If your room changed location, close the door and try again. Only leave when connection has been re-established. The voices are harmless. Don't converse with them. Never lock the doors. If you have any trouble, call Jessica Covenwood at this number. This is the only phone call you can trust. At the bottom of the page was a final note. I will come to collect you, but only when the rental period is over. Not a moment sooner. There is no living until then. All became clear. Garrett had a poor attempt at humor. A majority of the first night was peaceful. Of my novel's final 6 chapters that needed completing, I was able to stay up late and finish 2 of them. First drafts at least. My final days on the island would have to be spent proofreading before sending it to my editor. Still, 2 chapters wasn't a bad night's work. After patting myself on the back for a job well done, I looked at my phone. It was 12:18 a.m. It's past 11:25, Garrett. Was this why I needed to turn off the lights? I chuckled to myself as another rule came to mind. Don't exit the house after midnight. I continued to laugh to myself as I ventured downstairs, opened the front door and stepped out into the night. The view was brilliant. A blanket of stars covering the Cape in the night sky. What was the reasoning behind this rule, Garrett? You didn't want me to enjoy the view? I turned and stepped back into the house. Then I locked the door. Oops, that's another rule broken. Hope the house doesn't chastise me. With that, I traveled upstairs to the bedroom and fell into a blissful sleep the moment my body met the sheets. 3:27 a.m. I awoke to a thunderous banging at the front door. Practically sleepwalking, I eventually made my way downstairs and opened the door. Outside there were no longer any stars. Their light was replaced with a thick fog rolling over the ocean. There was no one there but me. I closed the door and went back to bed. 4:42 a.m. I woke again, ripped from a dream state where I was turning in my novel to the publishing house. In this dream, Garrett was my boss. There is nothing here, Mary, all that time and nothing to show for it. He continued to flip through before stopping somewhere in the middle. Unlike the other pages, this one had text. The words were familiar, but they weren't written by me. Garrett's rules painted the page, the pitch-black ink slowly dripping from the paper. You should have followed the rules, Mary. That's when I sprang to life. My heart pounded as I sat in bed. My heart nearly sank before I noticed a chill in the room. I had left the window open. Relieved, I shut the window and went back to sleep. 5:19 a.m. No sound woke me this time. Instead, it was nature calling, beckoning me to take a late-night trip to the bathroom. Upon opening the bedroom door, I was greeted by a deeply unsettling sight. It was a hallway, not the hall that should have been there, an entirely different hallway. It was narrow, almost too thin for a person to walk through, and it was long, very long. I rubbed my eyes to test them. The hallway was still there. If it's not a dream, then what? I turned my head to see that the bedroom door had shut itself. I ran to open it, but it stayed closed. Without a whole lot of options, I continued down the hall. At the end was a final door. I pushed the door open. There was no light inside. Still, I could make out something standing in the center of the room facing me. It was a shadowy figure, slightly darker than the blackness around it. A vague glow outlined its form. It was tall, taller than any man. It took a step towards me. In a flash, it lunged to my position. Everything went black. My eyes opened to sunlight pouring into the room. I was back in bed. This was strange. Every bone in my body told me it wasn't a dream, but rational thinking dictated otherwise. I had no choice but to entertain the idea that I was having a nightmare. The sooner I finished the book, I thought, the sooner they would vanish. My first few hours awake were productive. I was able to write over half of the next chapter. My progress was, however, impeded by a knock at the front door. There was someone out there, a man. "Can I help you?" I asked, confused. Was hoping I could help you, actually. The name's Hank. I'm a locksmith from the mainland. Garrett sent me to check the locks on all of the doors. Then he went upstairs. I sat down on the couch and continued writing. An hour passed, then another. I was able to finish up some more work, but something kept scratching at the back of my mind. I skimmed the list again. 2 things stood out. Rule number 7. Never lock the doors. Even if Garrett was deranged, it was clear he didn't want the doors locked. So why then would he send a locksmith? The second thing that jumped out at me was the end of the Rule 3. Ask for last names. "Hank," I yelled out, hoping to get his attention. There was no answer, only silence. To my dismay, the second floor was completely vacant. Hank was nowhere to be found. I returned to the first floor. Hank was there sitting on the couch, looking over my manuscript. There was no way he could have snuck by me. I stood frozen at the bottom of the stairs. "Hank," I asked, "what's your last name?" "Redden." "My name is Hank Redden, why do you ask?" I looked down at the list in my hand. His name was supposed to be Hank Penston. No reason, just curious. "I have some work to do. I'll be right back." I sprinted to the edge of the island, unsure of who or what that was inside the house. At first I called Garrett. No answer. Before I could try another number, my ex-husband called. I had been ignoring his calls for weeks. "Leslie's gone, Mary." My blood ran cold. It was said with the same tone as it was 2 years before. Leslie was our daughter. Before Jack and I divorced, she was struck by a car on her way home from school. Jack, why are you saying this? Tears rolled down my face. It's your fault, Mary. It's all because of you. His voice became louder and less distinct, an inhuman growl. You're to blame, Mary. You belong where you are. I hope you rot in that house. I looked down at the list. Rule number 2. Don't answer your phone. Callers cannot be trusted. I wiped away my tears and looked at the last rule. Jessica was the only phone call you can trust, according to Garrett. After 2 tones, she answered. You broke a rule, didn't you? A few, actually. She let out a sigh. Did you let anyone in? Yes, Hank. Hank Penston? No, Hank Redden. There was another disappointed sigh. Okay, listen carefully. I want you to go to the back of the house, but act natural. Any slight change in your attitude could set him off. Open the hatch. That is the master switch. When you pull the lever, it will deactivate all energy on the island. When you reset the lever, the house will reconstitute. This will wipe the slide clean. I didn't understand how it all worked, but I had heard enough to warrant an obvious follow-up question. At this point, I saw Hank walking alongside the house. Jessica must have heard, because her voice adopted a tone of urgency. Pull the lever, now. I did as she said. Jessica, we did it. Clearly, she wasn't as pleased with the victory as I was. That was fine. I was just thankful to be alive. Once inside the house, I laid down in bed and held the list to my face, scrutinizing every last detail. I was determined not to break another rule for the rest of my stay. The remaining days, I didn't break the rules, and the house was quiet. Hours passed. As my rental period came to a close, I sat in the living room and reflected on the events of the week. Knock, knock. I opened the door and let Garrett in. Garrett, what is this place? He smirked. Many words come to mind. Anomaly, portal, impossibility. I personally think it's a mirror showing us ourselves in the way we never thought possible. A place where our past and present intersect. I smiled. Does that mean you'll leave a good review? I chuckled. You know what? I'll do it right now. I opened the app and a bit of information caught my eye as I scrolled. Checkout time, 12 p.m. I looked up at my phone's display. It turned from 11:59 to 12 as I watched. I let someone in before time was up, meaning a rule had been broken. The note at the end of the list came to mind as the dread set in. I will come to collect you, but only when the rental period is over, not a moment sooner. That wasn't Garrett. I looked up to see him standing directly in front of me. Something wrong, Mary? I dropped my things and ran out to the dock as fast as I could. The ferry had just arrived, the real Garrett aboard, motioning for me to hurry. After boarding, I turned back and looked at the house, one last time.